Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
Let me take you back to the beginning, when things seemed simple enough, or so we thought. Our HOA board, bless their hearts, had been warned for years about the unfinished lots in the neighborhood. It was a no-brainer. Keep an eye on the permits, know who has the developer rights, and make sure everything's up to code. But they didn't listen. They'd shrug it off, time and again, nodding politely to the real estate agent and the few diligent homeowners who tried to remind them. "We'll get to it," they'd say, when the time's right. Then, those vacant lots got scooped up. Construction crews rolled in, trucks everywhere, hammering away as if all those warnings had never even been whispered. Every day, we'd see walls rising and roofs being slapped on. The board was just thrilled. Growth is great for property values, they kept repeating like a mantra. They'd flash these proud smiles as they'd walk around the neighborhood, nodding and waving at everyone, like this was some parade they'd orchestrated themselves. Then the rain came. I remember it was one of those endless downpours, the kind that has you thinking you're living in the tropics. A few homes on the edge of the new lots started flooding. Water crept into basements, ruined carpets, and left a musty, damp smell that hung in the air even days after. You could see it, seeping up like some nasty secret trying to escape. And that's when the whispers started. Did they even set up drainage? People started asking each other. Does anyone know if permits were even pulled? Someone took it upon themselves to call Florida's Swift Mud, the governing body for our area's water management. An inspector came out, clipboard in hand, walking around, looking at the new lots, taking photo after photo. He didn't say much, just shook his head a lot. Then, he dropped the bomb. Our neighborhood was not up to code. He'd said it quietly, almost to himself, but a few of us overheard. And, believe me, word got around fast. I marched up to the next HOA meeting. I was ready for some answers, and I wasn't the only one. The board members had assembled at the front like they always did, looking nervous for the first time ever. We were a packed house that night, everyone buzzing with anger and confusion, shifting in our seats, waiting for someone to tell us what in the world was going on. The HOA president, Jim, cleared his throat. He looked like a deer in headlights. There's been a bit of a misunderstanding. The drainage system wasn't exactly put in before the utilities were laid down. "What do you mean, wasn't put in?" Someone barked from the back. "Well, it should have been taken care of," Jim mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "But, it wasn't. You mean to tell us," I interrupted, louder than I'd planned, "that we have no drainage system under these new houses?" Jim shifted uncomfortably. The CAM was supposed to handle it, you see. The CAM filled out the paperwork, but it turns out maybe they didn't inform us about the whole code situation. There was a collective groan, a mutter of disbelief spreading through the room. "Are you saying the CAM did all this without telling the board?" someone asked, voice rising. "Well, that's what it looks like," Jim said, practically whispering. "We believe they went ahead and filled out the water permits without fully informing us about the code requirements for drainage." "And you didn't think to check?" Another homeowner yelled. "We're not contractors," Jim shot back, his face going red. "How are we supposed to know?" "We trusted them." It was chaos after that. Voices clashed. Questions were shouted, fingers pointed. And amidst the arguing, Jim tried to regain control, pounding the table. All right, calm down. The important thing is that we're handling it now. We've already hired a certified underground contractor." "Handling it? Is that what you call it?" I fired back. "They're down there digging around, and they've already cut the cable and internet lines. And now you're telling us they hit the gas line, too." The room erupted again. Some people were just stunned into silence. Others were getting up to leave, shaking their heads. But I stayed. I wasn't leaving until I got some real answers. "How much is this going to cost us?" I demanded, folding my arms and staring at Jim, daring him to look away. Jim looked pained, as if he'd hoped no one would ask. "We're looking at around $75,000, he finally admitted. The room fell dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. $75,000? Someone repeated, almost in disbelief. "Yes," Jim nodded, barely meeting anyone's gaze. There's no other option at this point. We have to install the drainage system, and that's what it's going to cost. Well, we should have done it earlier, but now it's too late. Oh, so now it's too late, I shouted, unable to contain myself. When we warned you, it wasn't worth looking into. But now that homes are flooding, it's suddenly a priority. Look, Jim tried to defend himself, holding up his hands like we were the unreasonable ones. It wasn't the board's fault. We thought the developer would handle it. The covenants say the developer's supposed to take care of all this infrastructure before handing it over. Well, where's this developer? Someone shouted. That's complicated, Jim stammered. The developer rights seem to have disappeared. Disappeared? I repeated, incredulous. You're telling me that somehow the developer's responsibility vanished into thin air? Jim sighed, exasperated. They set up an LLC. All right. And apparently, that LLC is no longer active. Legally, they can't be sued. So we're stuck with the bill, I said, my voice cold. Because you didn't check who had the developer rights. He tried to reason with us, throwing out the classic line about how HOA boards are usually run by volunteers who mean well but aren't always professional. We're doing the best we can here, he said, like he wanted a medal for it. Well, your best is costing us $75,000, someone shot back. The conversation went in circles for another hour, but the bottom line never changed. The board wanted us, the homeowners, to cough up the money for their blunder. And even after all this, they were still blaming everyone else. The CAM, the developer, the construction crews. Everyone but themselves. I went home that night seething. It was one thing to make a mistake, but to refuse to take responsibility for it? To try and hide behind legalese and half-hearted excuses? It felt like a betrayal. We trusted these people with our community, and now we were the ones paying the price. The digging continued for weeks. Every few days, there was a new problem, a cut line, a burst pipe, or some other disaster they hadn't planned for. And every time something went wrong, the board had some excuse, some new person to blame. It became a running joke among the neighbors, though it wasn't funny in the least. What's it going to be today? We'd ask each other when the crews showed up in the morning. Another water line? The electric this time. I'll never forget the day they finally finished, if you could call it that. We were left with torn-up lawns, mismatched patches of grass, and a bill that would haunt us for years. Jim held another meeting, grinning as if he'd just saved us all. The drainage is fixed, he announced, beaming like we were supposed to applaud. Somehow, the HOA president still walked around the neighborhood, greeting people with that same self-assured smile. The flood damage to the homes was still there, our lawns were a mess, and our HOA fees had doubled to cover the cost. But hey, at least the drainage was fixed, right? The HOA board should talk to multiple lawyers about a construction defect lawsuit and don't just take one board member's opinion. If you are on the board, get it put on the agenda and vote on getting a consultation so you know what the options are. It is possible the lawsuit isn't worth it. The developer is bankrupt or judgment-proof or for other reasons. Often these disputes are settled without going to trial or spending much on legal fees. $75,000 is not that much in the context of a construction defect lawsuit. Even a bankrupt construction company could afford $75,000. So my experience was in a different state. But what happened was we did consult with construction defect attorneys and got a judgment in arbitration for $12 million. 95% of which came from the subcontractor's insurance. Was the board president, and that developer tried every which way to get me to sign a liability release for my community, and thankfully I never did. I think in the end he had to cut a check for $200,000 or something. They didn't follow the governing documents at all and used the HOA as a means to push business losses onto their clients. You see, it's my sincere belief that HOAs aren't inherently bad, they are just subject to legal fraud by other bad actors. Cough, cough, real estate developers and construction companies. I served with mostly good people on the board, but most of them just believed whatever the developer told them, which is how the trouble starts. Good luck. With your mention of SwiftMud, SWFWMD, I know of a bit of what you were about to go through. I actually enjoy my dealings with them, but that's a different aspect of the industry. Your original developer may be gone or judgment-proof, but there are going to be quite a few layers of protection for you here. First off, whoever built the new houses, your CAM, their company as well, you can put on the hook for their application fraud. Remember, you aren't pursuing their development rights. but their responsibilities, and Florida requires these companies to be bonded and/or insured. If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day. I've owned my townhome for 8 years now, nestled in this little community where every building houses 4 units. The HOA's rules? Well, they're particular, to say the least. They maintain the lawn but leave each of us responsible for our own quarter of the building's exterior. That means exterior walls, balconies, roofs, patios, you name it. We've got flat roofs on these buildings, and keeping them in decent shape involves recoating them with silicone every 5 years or so. Sounds simple enough, right? 7 years back, the HOA struck up a deal with a roofing company. The idea was to make it easy. Everyone gets their roof recoated in one swoop. And we'd all save money in the process. It made sense to me, so I signed on. But not everyone in the neighborhood saw it that way. People had their reasons. Some had recently coated their roofs and weren't keen on doing it again. Others just didn't want to pay for it. So, what ended up happening? Well, it's as messy as you'd expect. The roofing company came in and only worked on the units whose owners opted into the deal. Some buildings got a full recoating, some none at all, and some, like ours, ended up with a patchwork of 1/4, 1/2, or 3/4 coverage. Our building, for instance, ended up with 3 of the 4 units coated, which seemed fine at the time. But now, 7 years down the line, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Fast forward to the present, and I've got water dripping through my ceiling. I know the coating from 7 years ago is well past its prime, but I've also got no way of knowing for sure if my quarter of the roof is the culprit. Still, I figured I'd take the logical first step, reach out to the HOA to see if they'd organize another neighborhood recoating. After all, it was their idea in the first place. But as soon as I mentioned it, I got shot down. They had zero plans to recoat anything and made it clear it was our problem now. So, fine, I can't force the HOA to do anything, but I sure as hell need to do something about this leak. I went through the list of local roofing companies, dialing one after another, hoping for a straightforward solution. But as soon as I mentioned my address, things got strange. Some companies outright refused to even look at our roof. A few gave it a once-over but wouldn't touch it because we'd only be repairing 1/4 of it. Others? Well, they started ghosting me, dodging calls, never returning voicemails. The ones that did bother to respond? They either quoted outrageous prices or told me I'd be wasting my money. Apparently, fixing only my section was as good as throwing cash into the wind. Then, there was the gem of a conversation I had with one company representative. "Look," he said, his voice dripping with frustration. "Nobody wants to work on your buildings. We've all ended up with horrible reviews when roof problems come back because we could only fix one part. It's a nightmare for us." I was fuming. I get it. It's no picnic for them either. But what was I supposed to do? I'm left with a leaky roof, no cooperative roofing companies, and an HOA that's more than happy to sit back and watch it all crumble. It doesn't help that my building is almost ghostly. One unit is vacant. And the neighbors? Well, let's just say they're about as friendly as a Monday morning. I wouldn't recognize them if we bumped into each other in a dark alley. No one's going to volunteer to band together for a collective fix. Frustrated and running out of options, I finally called the HOA again. "Can you at least send out a notice to other residents about coordinating repairs?" I asked. Silence. Then, a sigh on the other end of the line, as though I'd just asked them to single-handedly construct the Taj Mahal. "We can't get involved in that," the HOA representative finally said. "We leave exterior maintenance up to each homeowner." I gripped the phone tighter. "So you're telling me you're just going to let these buildings fall apart?" "The roof on my unit is leaking. It's only a matter of time before the rest of it goes. You do understand that, right?" A pause. Then, with all the empathy of a robot, they repeated, "It's up to each homeowner." I wanted to scream, but I bit my tongue. What's the point of paying HOA fees if they won't lift a finger for a simple announcement, let alone for organizing maintenance? Fine. Then, I took to online forums, posting about my issue and hoping for advice. I even called a contractor friend for a second opinion. He didn't sugarcoat it. "Honestly," he told me, "even if you find a handyman to slap a new coat on, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken dam. If the leak isn't coming from your section, it's not going to stop a thing." "Great," I muttered. "So what do I do? Just sit here and watch my ceiling cave in?" He hesitated before suggesting, maybe you could try reaching out to that vacant unit's owner. If enough of you go in together, you might be able to do something bigger. But if they're like your HOA, good luck getting a response. I tried reaching out to the vacant unit's owner, a long shot if there ever was one. But as expected, I got no reply. A neighbor from across the street told me the guy lived out of state and rarely came around. Wonderful. So much for a coordinated effort. With my roof slowly deteriorating and no help in sight, I took a step I hadn't really wanted to consider. I found a local handyman who didn't mind doing a one-quarter job. We had a brief back and forth over the phone, and he seemed willing enough, though, to be honest, I could tell he was mostly interested because he needed the work. I wasn't feeling particularly optimistic, but I figured it was better than nothing. When he arrived, I showed him the roof and explained the situation. He scratched his head, looking over the patchy coatings on each section, and finally said, this isn't going to be pretty. I shrugged. Just do what you can. I'm out of options here. After a few hours, he came down, visibly worn out, and gave me his report. I did the best I could, but this patch job might hold for a little while, a few months, maybe, but you're probably going to need something more permanent soon. I sighed, barely able to muster a nod. The Band-Aid fix was done, and I was out a good chunk of change. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the roof would start leaking again, if not from my section, then from one of the others. Now, every time I hear the rain start to tap against the roof, I feel that creeping anxiety kick in, wondering if this will be the storm that finally sends the water pouring through again. I've done what I can, but the HOA? They're content to keep pretending this isn't a growing problem. Maybe the leak will start dripping again tomorrow. Maybe it'll hold for a few months, like the handyman said. But either way, I'm left here, holding my breath, waiting for the inevitable. All because my HOA decided that the roof over my head was none of their concern. And as I sit here, stewing over it all, I can't help but wonder, just how many of us are living like this? Patching holes, throwing our money away, all while the HOA collects their dues and turns a blind eye. Roofs on a townhome are not common property. The sidewalks, unassigned grass, pool areas, things like that are common. Also, Op says townhouse, where he is responsible for his part of the building. The fixing of the roof would be on him. If the water leak is not from his roof, though, the unit owner that has the actual leak is responsible for Op's repairs. In a condo, it is different. Condos have responsibility to the exterior of the entire buildings. They sometimes even cover the interior of the units. They can be responsible for roof leaks in certain situations. Depends on how the CC&Rs were written. I would find where the leak is coming from first, then make repairs and try to get the neighbors on board. If Op can get all 4 unit owners to re-roof, then he may actually get a roofer out there. I live in OP's exact scenario, but thankfully in Arizona. A 2-story townhouse with a flat roof. They too also have to be recoated every 5, although we can usually push it to 7 without issues. We are, in fact, condos. Our governing documents state as we are. The HOA is responsible for exterior maintenance and common elements. The roof is one of the common elements. It's been done twice in the last 12 years. Op needs to reread their CC&Rs very carefully. If they left roofs out, then the founders did a piss-poor job of writing the documents. If the roof is mentioned, then the HOA is responsible for roof repairs. Op is responsible for the water damage from the studs in. Within reason, if the HOA docs are supposed to cover roofs and refuse to do so, they are going to get perilously close to losing their HO6 policy. A lot of insurance policies have clauses that take issue with not performing basic maintenance or fixing issues like water leaks in a timely fashion when they become known. Mitigate damages. How hot are they going to be to pay out claims come next hurricane season? The worst-case scenario is everyone loses their blanket master insurance because the HOA is picking and choosing what maintenance to keep up on, and the HOA's insurance company drops them like a hot potato. Someone becomes seriously injured or killed in the common elements, accident or otherwise, and sues the HOA. Well, then every single friggin' owner is on the hook for their proportional share, what could be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, because each owner in the HOA has a fractional ownership in the common elements. Just the fact that water damage getting in from the neighbors into your property likely gives you cause to litigate, depending on your state's laws. What Op has on their hands is a nightmare, and no one seems to grasp the gravity of risk they are taking by kicking the bucket down the road. they will have a worthless assets on their hands. It would almost be worth walking away or selling, as is, to a LLC company to cut their losses if a lawyer won't take their case or the HOA doesn't see the light. It would seem to me that the roof would be a common element, as you own a townhome and not a semi-detached house. As a common element, it should be the responsibility of the HOA to take care of it all. It is, at the very least, common to your 4 units, and the HOA would fix it all and then backbill the 4 units. You simply can't leave this decision up to individual unit owners. Please check your declarations and maybe contact a lawyer who specializes in HOAs, condos, townhomes.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.